In the rapidly changing global landscape, the possibility of economic and political instability has become a looming concern, even for developed nations. Among them, these prominent European countries, France, Germany, Spain, and more, face a confluence of crises that could lead to significant turmoil by 2025. From socioeconomic challenges to geopolitical pressures, these nations must navigate complex terrains to avoid a potential collapse. This video examines the factors contributing to their precarious situations and evaluates the risks that could push them over the edge. So, here's the list of 10 European countries that will collapse soon. Before we start, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment your thoughts. Here we go. Number 10. France. The burden of social unrest and economic stagnation. Rising social unrest. France has a long history of public protests and strikes, but recent years have seen an escalation in both frequency and intensity. The Yellow Vest movement, which began in 2018 as a protest against fuel taxes, has morphed into a broader expression of discontent with inequality, high living costs, and government policies. In 2023 and 2024, protests against pension reforms and labor laws have further strained the relationship between the government and citizens. Economic inequality. The gap between urban elites and rural or suburban working-class communities has widened, exacerbating feelings of neglect and resentment. Immigration and integration. Tensions over immigration policies and the integration of migrant populations continue to polarize society. Economic challenges. France's economic growth has been sluggish, struggling to recover fully from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. High unemployment rates, especially among the youth, coupled with rising public debt, have created a precarious economic situation. Public debt. France's public debt surpassed 110% of GDP in 2024, raising concerns about fiscal sustainability. Industrial decline. Key industries, such as automotive and aerospace, face challenges from global competition and green transition policies. Political fragmentation. The French political landscape is becoming increasingly fragmented, with traditional parties losing ground to populist and extremist movements. This polarization makes governance difficult and undermines public trust in democratic institutions. Number 9. Germany, an economic powerhouse under siege. Energy crisis. Germany's decision to phase out nuclear power and reduce reliance on coal has made it heavily dependent on imported energy, particularly natural gas. The conflict in Ukraine and tensions with Russia have disrupted supply chains, causing energy prices to skyrocket. Energy dependence. Efforts to transition to renewable energy sources have been hampered by infrastructure and investment challenges. Industrial impact. Energy-intensive industries such as chemicals and manufacturing are struggling to remain competitive. Demographic decline. Germany's aging population presents significant economic and social challenges. By 2025, a shrinking workforce and increasing dependency ratio could strain public finances and social services. Labor shortages. Key sectors, including healthcare and engineering, face acute labor shortages. Pension crisis. The rising number of retirees puts immense pressure on the pension system. Political instability. Germany has traditionally been a beacon of political stability, but this image is being tested. The rise of far-right parties, such as the Alternative for Germany, AfD, has introduced divisive rhetoric and policy deadlocks. Coalition struggles. The difficulty in forming stable coalitions undermines effective governance. Public discontent. Increasing dissatisfaction with government handling of economic and social issues fuels support for extremist movements. Number 8. Spain. Regional tensions and economic vulnerabilities. Catalonia and regional separatism. Spain's unity is threatened by persistent calls for independence in regions like Catalonia and the Basque Country. The Catalan independence referendum of 2017 marked a turning point, and tensions remain high. Political deadlock. The central government's refusal to negotiate autonomy demands exacerbates divisions. Economic costs. Political uncertainty deters investment and disrupts economic activity in separatist regions. Economic fragility. Spain's economy has struggled with high unemployment and a reliance on volatile sectors such as tourism and construction. Youth unemployment. One of the highest rates in Europe, youth unemployment exceeds 30%. Debt and deficits. Persistent budget deficits and rising public debt limit. Fiscal flexibility. Climate vulnerabilities. Spain is on the front lines of climate change with increasing desertification and extreme weather events threatening agriculture and water resources. Agricultural decline. Droughts and heat waves reduce crop yields, impacting rural economies. Number 7. Poland. A democracy under pressure. Political polarization and democratic backsliding. Poland, once hailed as a post-communist success story, has experienced significant democratic backsliding in recent years. The ruling Law and Justice Party, PIS, has been accused of undermining judicial independence, curbing media freedoms, and consolidating power. These actions have drawn criticism from the European Union and raised concerns about the erosion of democratic norms. The increasing polarization between PIS supporters and opposition groups has created a deeply divided society. Protests against government policies have become more frequent and intense, reflecting growing dissatisfaction among citizens. If this trend continues, Poland risks political paralysis or even widespread unrest, economic vulnerabilities. While Poland's economy has been relatively robust compared to other European nations, it faces mounting challenges. Rising inflation, labor shortages, and over-reliance on EU funds are significant concerns. Additionally, the country's refusal to align with certain EU climate policies has jeopardized access to critical financial aid. Poland's strained relationship with the EU could exacerbate these economic vulnerabilities. The potential loss of funding and trade opportunities would significantly impact key sectors, such as manufacturing and agriculture, leading to economic stagnation or decline. Geopolitical tensions. Poland's proximity to Russia and its role as a NATO member place it at the center of geopolitical tensions. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has heightened security concerns, and Poland's strong anti-Russian stance has made it a target for hybrid threats, including cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. The country's heavy military spending has also strained public finances, diverting resources from social programs and infrastructure development. Number 6. Serbia, a nation at a crossroads, authoritarianism and political instability. Serbia's political landscape is dominated by President Aleksandar Vučić and his Serbian Progressive Party. Critics argue that Vučić has consolidated power to an alarming degree, undermining democratic institutions and silencing dissent. Media freedom is severely restricted, and opposition parties face significant obstacles in challenging the ruling government. The growing dissatisfaction with Vučić's leadership has led to protests and civil unrest, particularly among younger generations. As Serbia's democratic space continues to shrink, the likelihood of political instability increases, potentially leading to a more volatile and unpredictable environment. Economic stagnation and corruption. Serbia's economy faces numerous challenges, including high unemployment, low wages, and widespread corruption. While the government has pursued foreign investments, particularly from China and Russia, these deals often come with unfavorable terms that prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability. The country's dependence on foreign aid and loans leaves it vulnerable to external shocks. Furthermore, corruption remains a significant impediment to economic growth, with public resources often mismanaged or siphoned off by political elites. This systemic issue erodes public trust and stifles entrepreneurial activity, further limiting economic opportunities. Ethnic tensions and regional instability. Ethnic tensions remain a critical issue in Serbia, particularly regarding its relationship with Kosovo. The unresolved status of Kosovo continues to strain relations with neighboring countries and the EU, hindering Serbia's accession prospects. Periodic flare-ups in the region risk destabilizing the Western Balkans, with Serbia's actions often viewed as a destabilizing factor. Additionally, nationalist rhetoric and historical grievances exacerbate divisions within Serbian society, creating an environment ripe for conflict. If these tensions are not addressed, Serbia risks descending into further instability. Number 5. Hungary, a nation on the brink. Authoritarianism and democratic backsliding. Under Prime Minister Viktor Orban's leadership, Hungary has shifted dramatically towards authoritarian governance. The dismantling of democratic institutions, suppression of press freedom, and erosion of judicial independence have alienated Hungary from its EU peers. Critics argue that Orban's government prioritizes power consolidation over addressing the nation's growing economic and social issues. The European Union has repeatedly clashed with Hungary over these policies, even triggering Article 7 proceedings, which could strip the country of its voting rights within the bloc. This ongoing tension weakens Hungary's position within the EU, limiting its ability to attract foreign investments and secure financial aid. Economic fragility. Hungary's economy has shown signs of vulnerability, exacerbated by its over-reliance on EU funds. In 2024, the EU withheld significant financial aid due to concerns over corruption and misuse of funds. Without these crucial resources, Hungary faces difficulty maintaining infrastructure projects and public services. Additionally, the Hungarian economy is highly dependent on foreign direct investment, FDI, particularly from German automotive companies. However, the global shift towards electric vehicles and rising labor costs in Hungary have led to a decline in investments. Unemployment is on the rise and inflation has eroded purchasing power, creating a precarious economic situation. Social unrest and demographic challenges. Hungary's demographic profile presents another significant hurdle. With one of the lowest fertility rates in Europe and a declining population, the country faces a shrinking workforce and an aging population. Orban's government has tried to address this with pro-natalist policies, such as financial incentives for families, but these measures have yielded limited results. Public discontent has grown due to rising living costs and limited opportunities for young people. Protests against government corruption and authoritarian practices have become more frequent, signaling a society on edge. The combination of political repression and economic hardship could lead to Number 4. Italy, a fragile giant. Political instability. Italy has long struggled with political fragmentation and instability. The country's history of frequent government changes, over 70 since World War II, reflects deep-seated divisions within its political system. Recent elections have failed to produce strong, stable leadership, leaving Italy ill-equipped to tackle its mounting challenges. The rise of populist and far-right parties, such as Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy, has further polarized the political landscape. While these movements have tapped into public frustration with traditional elites, they have struggled to deliver coherent policies to address Italy's economic and social crises. Economic stagnation and debt crisis. Italy's economic woes are among the most severe in the EU. With a public debt exceeding 145% of GDP, the country's fiscal position is unsustainable. Efforts to reduce debt have been hampered by low economic growth, high unemployment, and structural inefficiencies. The banking sector remains another significant weakness. Non-performing loans, NPLs, continue to plague Italian banks, undermining their ability to support businesses and households. The European Central Bank, ECB, has warned that Italy's financial system could face severe stress in the event of an economic downturn. Additionally, Italy's reliance on tourism and small to medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, makes its economy particularly vulnerable to external shocks. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted these vulnerabilities, and recovery has been slow and uneven. With global economic uncertainties expected to persist, Italy's economic prospects look bleak. Regional disparities and social divisions. Italy's deep regional divides further complicate its challenges. The prosperous north, with its industrial base, contrasts starkly with the underdeveloped south, where unemployment and poverty are rampant. These disparities have fueled resentment and calls for greater regional autonomy, particularly from northern regions like Lombardy and Veneto. Social tensions have also been exacerbated by immigration. As a key entry point for migrants crossing the Mediterranean, Italy has struggled to manage the influx, often facing criticism from both domestic and international actors. The resulting strain on public services and social cohesion adds another layer of instability. Number 3. Greece, a nation on the edge, economic turmoil and debt dependency. Greece's economic struggles are well documented. Since the 2008 global financial crisis, the country has grappled with crippling debt, austerity measures, and slow economic recovery. Despite bailout packages from the EU and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Greece's public debt remains unsustainable, exceeding 200% of its GDP. The austerity measures implemented as part of the bailout agreements have left deep scars on the Greek population. Unemployment remains high, particularly among the youth, and public services are underfunded. Many Greeks feel disillusioned with the EU, believing that the imposed measures prioritized creditors over the well-being of citizens. Political instability. Greece's political landscape is equally fraught. Successive governments have struggled to maintain public trust, with corruption scandals and ineffective policies eroding confidence. The rise of populist parties, both on the left and the right, has further polarized the electorate, making it difficult to achieve consensus on critical reforms. The potential resurgence of anti-EU sentiment could lead to political instability, with some factions advocating for a departure from the Eurozone or even the EU itself. Such a move would have catastrophic economic and social consequences, potentially plunging the country into chaos. Migration crisis. As a frontline state in the migration crisis, Greece has borne the brunt of asylum seekers arriving via the Mediterranean. The country's infrastructure and resources are stretched thin, and tensions between local communities and migrants have escalated. The lack of a comprehensive EU-wide strategy to address the issue has left Greece isolated and overwhelmed. Number 2. Bosnia and Herzegovina, a fragile state. Ethnic divisions and political paralysis. Bosnia and Herzegovina remains one of the most divided countries in Europe. The 1995 Dayton Agreement, which ended the Bosnian War, created a complex political structure that has been more effective at maintaining peace than fostering unity. The country is divided into two autonomous entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, predominantly Bosniak and Croat, and Republika Srpska, primarily Serb. This structure has entrenched ethnic divisions and hindered effective governance. Political gridlock is a persistent issue, with ethnic leaders prioritizing their group's interests over national progress. Corruption is rampant, and public institutions are weak, leaving the country ill-equipped to address pressing challenges. Economic stagnation. Bosnia and Herzegovina's economy has struggled to gain momentum since the war. High unemployment, particularly among young people, and a lack of foreign investment have stymied growth. The country's dependence on remittances from the diaspora underscores its economic fragility. Efforts to join the EU have stalled due to the country's inability to implement necessary reforms. This stagnation has created frustration among citizens, many of whom see little hope for a better future. The brain drain of skilled workers leaving for opportunities abroad further exacerbates the situation. Rising nationalist tensions. Nationalist rhetoric has been on the rise, particularly in Republika Srpska, where leaders have periodically threatened secession. Such moves would violate the Dayton Agreement and could reignite conflict. The international community, including the EU and NATO, has expressed concern about the potential for renewed violence, but efforts to mediate have been largely ineffective. Number 1. Moldova, a nation caught between East and West, political instability and governance issues. Moldova, a small landlocked nation between Romania and Ukraine, has long struggled with political turmoil. Its parliamentary system has been plagued by corruption scandals and power struggles, resulting in frequent government collapses. The polarization between pro-European and pro-Russian factions exacerbates this instability, leaving the country unable to implement consistent policies or reforms. The 2024 parliamentary elections intensified these divisions, with no clear majority emerging. This stalemate undermines governance. leaving critical issues such as economic reforms and infrastructure development unaddressed. Without a stable government, Moldova risks becoming a failed state. Economic stagnation and migration. Moldova's economy is among the weakest in Europe, heavily reliant on remittances from its diaspora. Over 25% of its GDP comes from Moldovans working abroad, primarily in the European Union and Russia. This dependence highlights the lack of domestic opportunities, driving young and skilled workers to emigrate. The agricultural sector, a cornerstone of Moldova's economy, has been hit hard by climate change and outdated practices. Additionally, the energy crisis, exacerbated by Moldova's dependence on Russian gas, has strained the government's ability to provide basic services. Inflation and unemployment are rising, creating fertile ground for social unrest. Transnistria, a frozen conflict. The breakaway region of Transnistria, supported by Russia, remains a thorn in Moldova's side. This unresolved conflict prevents the nation from achieving full sovereignty and limits its ability to join the European Union. Any escalation in tensions could destabilize the entire country, particularly if external powers become involved. One more country is Ukraine, a nation at war and crisis, the ongoing war with Russia. Since the invasion by Russia in 2022, Ukraine has been embroiled in a brutal and protracted conflict. Despite significant support from Western allies in the form of military aid and economic assistance, the war has devastated the country. Key infrastructure, including energy grids, transportation networks, and industrial facilities, has been destroyed, leading to a humanitarian crisis. The war has also displaced millions of people, with many seeking refuge in neighboring countries or further afield. This mass exodus strains Ukraine's labor force and economic potential. As the conflict drags on, fatigue among Western allies could reduce the flow of aid, leaving Ukraine in a precarious position. Economic collapse. Ukraine's economy is in shambles, with GDP contracting sharply since 2022. The agricultural sector, a vital component of the nation's economy, has suffered due to disrupted supply chains and lost territory in the fertile eastern regions. Industrial production has also plummeted, and inflation is soaring. The country's dependence on external aid has created a precarious situation. Should donor fatigue set in or global economic conditions worsen, Ukraine could face a complete economic meltdown. This would have dire consequences for its ability to sustain the war effort and provide for its citizens. Political fragmentation and corruption. The war has exposed and exacerbated long-standing issues of corruption and political infighting in Ukraine. While President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership has been widely praised, internal divisions within the government and oligarchic influence remain significant challenges. These factors hinder effective governance and undermine public trust. The risk of political fragmentation increases as the war continues, particularly if regional leaders or oligarchs seek to exploit the situation for their gain. This could lead to a breakdown of central authority, further destabilizing the country. The conclusion. So, guys, this was the 10 European countries that will collapse soon. Hope you will like it and appreciate it. The potential collapse of Hungary and Italy in 2025 is not a foregone conclusion, but the warning signs are impossible to ignore. Both countries face a combination of political, economic, and social challenges that, if left unaddressed, could lead to disastrous outcomes. For Hungary, the key lies in reversing democratic backsliding and addressing economic vulnerabilities. The EU must play a more proactive role in ensuring accountability and supporting democratic forces within the country. For Italy, comprehensive economic reforms and political stabilization are crucial to restoring confidence and fostering growth. The stakes are high, not just for Hungary and Italy, but for the entire European Union and the global community. As 2025 approaches, the need for decisive and coordinated action has never been more urgent. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and press the bell icons for latest upcoming travel videos.